the forthcoming elections in Nigeria might have very far-reaching consequences. But if you're Nigerian, especially if you live in the continent, if you live in the continent, you live in Nigeria, I do like to point out what I see as the offshore and onshore Nigerians. The amount of optimism of people who believe that despite what appears to be threats to its existence, that Nigeria is going nowhere and that the country will remain together. However, as social scientists and academics, we continue to analyze the ongoing developments, especially in the context of the frightening insecurity in the country, and which unfortunately and sadly is not on the agenda for the elections. You would think that against the backdrop of Boko Haram, now I have this map here, Boko Haram crisis, African, this is part of a news item today, I just wanted to draw it up. Boko Haram crisis, African Union to discuss multinational force. So I will very quickly, I think that about now, I don't know that I want to be very, very presumptuous. I think that a lot of people have a sense of what Boko Haram is. Boko Haram, crudely translated, is Western education is evil. And so there has been antecedents to Boko Haram in terms of Islamist, fundamentalist insurgencies in Nigeria, but this is about the worst that there is in the history of the country. And more than ever before, something that Nigerians didn't believe could ever happen is already coming into the vocabulary, suicide bombing. There are tales online, especially on the social media in Nigeria, that Nigerians love life so much, and there have been some study that Nigerians like to point out that suggested that Nigerians were some of the happiest people in the world. Even if some of us look at it with a certain degree of exaggeration. But indeed, it remains very, very, very moving to see that despite the growing poverty, despite the discontent, that you could still find people generally being happy. However, it's also an indication of the cultural attitude to politics, that whereas if you were in North America, in Canada for example, something like security will top on the political agenda on an election like this. You would think that incumbent will be running on security, but that's not exactly the case. Why that is the situation, I would like to explore a little more. So, Boko Haram has intensified operations in the northeastern part of the country. That's the shaded area. And you can see Borno State. And you can see a place that has become metaphorical of the very dastardly dimension that the Boko Haram activities have taken, which is Chibok. If you remember Bring Back Our Girls campaign, the hashtag, about the over 200, the exact number is not quite known, 276, but I would like to just say over 250 children, girls, young girls were kidnapped from their hostel. And that has become very emblematic, and it is what boosted Boko Haram's stature, and the infamy as a terrorist organization across the world. It was as if the leader, Shekau, needed something, some kind of statement, some kind of symbolism to make a powerful statement across the world to be considered as a terrorist group worth paying attention to. And so, on April 14, 2014, he attacked, his fighters attacked this high school and kidnapped these kids in the night, and then left the imprimatur of Boko Haram, which is raising down the school. It was burnt. And so, this drew global attention more significantly on Boko Haram's activities. And since then, the confidence of this group has continued to grow. And earlier this week, last week, we had, excuse me, if it goes up, don't worry about it, I'll just bring it back if I need to. But I thought that I would look at it. The place that we're looking at, and this is part of the reason why it's been so difficult fighting Boko Haram, apart from other factors, it's considered to be the size of Belgium. There's a Sambisa forest where these kids were believed to have been kept. And then you look at Nigeria's borders there, there's Chad, there's Niger, and there's Cameroon. And so Boko Haram, terrorizes all of those, the neighbors between the boundaries of Nigeria, and then makes incursions into those three countries. It has become an international affair, within West Africa. And so against that backdrop, I said that a new vocabulary has been introduced, and this was with the bombing of the police headquarters in Abuja, where Boko Haram used first-use suicide bombing, which is the very first of its kind. And since then, it has continued to use younger kids. The latest being as late as about 2 weeks ago, where a 9-year-old child, a girl, was used as a suicide bomber. She was sent out, and then people believe that they are remote detonation, because these are kids who do not really understand what they're doing and will draw attention. The interesting thing to note about the fight against Boko Haram within the Nigerian context is that the Boko Haram activity, for now, the Nigerian government appears to have contained it within that part of the country. That's within the northeast. Initially, Boko Haram made incursions into Abuja. They have not struck anywhere in the southern part of the country. And some of us believe that the necessity for fighting the global cooperation to deal with Boko Haram is that now it's still relatively inefficient. It still works with light arms, IEDs, and one begins to wonder what may happen if the political situation in Nigeria does not provide the commodious environment to fight this terrorist organization, and it's able to gain access to more damaging arms. And so, if we take a look at that, what this portends, there are two things that come to mind towards Nigerians' elections in 2015, April 14, excuse me, is that, one, what is the implication of the displaced 1.5 billion Nigerians who live in those neighborhoods, who live in the region, who have moved into Chad, Niger, and other places? They're internally displaced or have moved across the border. What is the implication for the Nigerian election? What is the implication of that towards the campaign, to why the security question is on the front burner? The second question that I will seek to answer is, why is there increasing attacks by Boko Haram at this time, just at the eve of the election? That's the second question. Why is that? 3, given the nature of Boko Haram's operations, why has Boko Haram not been able to penetrate, to come further down south? Now, in taking these 3 questions, I use that to frame the political temperament in the country at this point. Some of it we have put out in the communique we issued from a similar talk with my colleagues at the Institute of African Studies late last week. Is that because Boko Haram is relatively contained, and that region, the southeastern part of the country, has no mineral resources, it has no natural resources, unlike the southern part, where we have petroleum. It does seem to some analysts, including me, that part of the reason there is a lukewarm attitude to dealing with Boko Haram is because it's a localized problem. And given the fragility of the state and the role of corruption, it becomes imperative to see that the responses that Nigerian government, the Nigerian state, let me put it that way, have made to the Biafran War and the Niger Delta War were driven by the need to protect the natural resource, which is oil. Nigeria largely depends on the crude oil from the Niger Delta area of the country, which would be, if you can see my mouse, that's this area. This is the Niger Delta area. Because this is the Atlantic. So you see, all of this is Atlantic. And this is the west coast of Nigeria. And that's Lagos, the former capital of Nigeria and the commercial capital right now. And so Nigeria is broadly divided into 6 geographic zones. Just the same way the northeast, which is where Boko Haram is operated, and then you have the southern part, southeast, southwest, south-south, and you have all of that configuration. So, whereas there have been insurgencies here, with the kidnapping of oil workers, which until Boko Haram began to exercise its influence more widely, the fear in Nigeria was around here. And this was an insurgency that is driven by the fight for the control of petroleum. And this has been brought under control. It took the intervention, the creativity of the Nigerian government, so to speak, through amnesty and the combination of cocktail policies to crush the movement for the emancipation of the Niger Delta people led. And there were so many other splinter groups operating in that region, this tiny region. And if you look around here, this is the southeastern part of the country. The southeastern part of the country was involved in the Biafran War, which is the Igbo-speaking area. And that was a fratricidal war that took about 3 years, with about 2 million people. It was almost close to genocide, which was in the mid-60s, 1960s to late to 1970. And all of these were brought under control. And the Nigerian army has the distinction of being perhaps the most elite army in Africa and the entire continent, because it's instrumental to containing different splinter groups and different crises in the West African region through ECOMOG. And it has also distinguished itself in many other peacekeeping missions. And so the fourth question that I want to pose, and then I will just go on to answer them, is why is an army, the Nigerian army, which has so distinguished itself in Liberia in peacekeeping across the continent and in some of those flashpoints fighting with United Nations, why has it been unable to crush Boko Haram? So if we take these into consideration, remember the other point I was making before I began to talk about the geographic location is the fact that Boko Haram made some incursions into, this is where the capital of Nigeria is, that's Abuja, right in the heart of it. And so Boko Haram had some sporadic eruptions, as I will call them here, but they have since stopped. Why has Boko Haram found it difficult to strike in the federal capital? Why is it being restricted to that area? What is the implication? And so, given the scenario that I'm painting, it becomes very clear to some very close watchers of the country that despite what appears to be a potentially explosive election with the opposition party, the APC, represented with a candidate who is a former general, Muhammadu Buhari, is a flag bearer for APC. And then you have the incumbent, President Goodluck Jonathan. It is increasingly becoming clearer to the ruling party, the People's Democratic Party, that the challenge by General Buhari's party, the APC, is real. I.e., they have virtually taken over the social media for anybody who is involved in Nigerian social media, Facebook, Twitter. This is being controlled virtually by the opposition party. It's a more technically savvy party. Its governors in that party run some of the most efficient states in Nigeria, including Lagos State. And so they have a reputation going into the Nigerian election. And it's the People's Democratic Party have actually acknowledged that 3 of the most well-run states in Nigeria, if you could say that, are APC states, where the governors have excelled. And then compared to the People's Democratic Party and the states where corruption is very rife and where a whole lot of pathologies visiting the people. For those of you who might not really understand the politics that I'm trying to describe in terms of governance and efficiency, the metaphor that we use to drive that home is Ebola. The Ebola outbreak was first reported, the primary case was in Lagos. And it was contained. As a matter of fact, a conflict or some kind of dispute developed in the media between the ruling party and the APC, where the opposition party, where the governor of Lagos State is from, took credit for containing Ebola. And the federal government, of course, didn't like the idea and said, okay, that, I mean, you may have been the localized site for it, but it was the federal might that had fight Ebola. And so with something as important and as deadly as Ebola, it was a more glaring announcement that some Nigerians are holding on to about the efficiency of representatives of the opposition party. However, with relation to the Boko Haram crisis, the question is being asked. General Buhari, that's the representative, the candidate for the opposition party, comes from the northern part of the country and has won elections, very clearly in those places. But right now we're talking about 1.5 million people at least displaced from that region. The implication, some analysts are already contending, is that they might not be able to vote. In other words, being displaced, some of them outside of the country, and given the insecurity in the place, elections, polling booths, and the rest of them might not take place. Might not be able to be, people might not, the Electoral Commission might not be able to erect polling booths in those places. And so critics of the Nigerian government say that in some sense they're actually playing politics with Boko Haram, because as far as the election goes, it's a double-edged sword. It creates the scenario of an inefficient president unable to check insecurity in a part of the state. And I actually like to think about those areas where Boko Haram operate as some of Nigerians' ungoverned spaces, because the kind of brazen attacks conducted by Boko Haram would only take place in a state where it's virtually empty, where it's ungoverned. And so, against that backdrop, it would appear that from the position of the ruling party, there is nothing to worry about, because it's just a local problem. In any case, it serves our interest in terms of numbers. But going beyond that, increasingly, some neighboring African states and the President of Ghana, which was the other slide that I put up there, the headline that I yes, that's it, at the upper part there. African Union to discuss multinational force. Part of the panacea for dealing with Boko Haram is not to see it essentially as a Nigerian problem, because of the capacity of Boko Haram if it settles down to export terror, not only to these neighboring African countries or neighboring West African countries, but also continentally. If it strikes up connections with Al-Shabaab and with Al-Qaeda and the rest of them, which is part of the reason it seems to us that John Kerry, the Secretary of State to the United States of America, visited Nigeria as a way of drawing attention or trying to encourage some peaceful election as much as possible. However, there's a sense in which when you enter into Nigerian social media and conversations around Nigeria, you see that the daredevilry that we associate with Nigeria and the kind of fear that we associate with these elections is not quite the case, back home. That does not in any case, anyway, erode it. But an important point about also the operations of Boko Haram and Nigerian elections is how citizen policing hasn't quite effectively taken root. I'm going to show you an image right now that shows something to the effect that I'm talking about. Recently, just only last week, I think. This is a news item that was published in September 2014. Here is Catholic seminarians, and then it's no coincidence that we're in St. Paul's too, you know. So we do appreciate our location and its symbolism. But here, Catholic seminarians are mistaken for Boko Haram members. And if you go further down the story, let's just look at the opening of the story. And it says the Ogun State Police Command on Tuesday debunked rumors of the arrest of some members of Boko Haram cells in the state. Some residents of Akute in the local government area had put a distress call to the police on citing strange faces in their communities. The men were bearded and wearing white robes. They were later discovered to be Catholic seminarians visiting a friend in the community. So with this kind of vigilance, it begins to strike us why Boko Haram might also find it. I had a couple of links that I wanted to show. Yes, will strike. And then with regards to the two political parties, you know, in terms of the election, there are news reports that they have struck upon an accord not to encourage any form of violence. However, indicators are that some old warlords in the Niger Delta area, where the current president hails, you know, are beginning to threaten fire and brimstone, that if the president loses the election, that Nigeria will burn. This is a motley group of different insurgent groups that have been involved with the struggle for resource control, which had increasingly seen the Nigerian state making concessions in terms of derivation policy. The derivation policy is one that grants a certain percentage of the national returns from sale of oil to the states of origin of those oil products. And so, against that scenario, it would appear that many of Nigerians' neighbors are also jittery about the elections. And so the president of Ghana has increasingly led the campaign for a multinational force. Now the final question that one would ask is, why has the Nigerian state, the Nigerian government, continued to rebuff moves to set up a multinational force? Now, I can't easily answer the question, but my conjecture is that the sensitivity of the subject matter, the sensitivity of the terrorist activity, and also the implied corruption in the system is something that appears to be protected. And so here is The Economist of London, a fitting statement that summarizes one of the mitigating factors against the fight against Boko Haram, and then this is, and I quote, "Only if the government tackles misrule and endemic corruption will the jihadist group be beaten." This is one of the things, as we speak, about 54 soldiers there, but I'm not so sure of the number, have been charged and are waiting for the firing squad to be killed for mutiny and for sabotaging the Nigerian state with regard to the fight against Boko Haram. Many of these soldiers, ill-equipped and with a kind of sabotage and intelligence leakage, have increasingly been victims also the same way as Boko Haram is sacking many of these villages. And then on the final note about the operations of Boko Haram, one of the telling aspects of the operations of this group is, as I had pointed out, the mentality of the leader. And why it does appear to be a localized problem that is centered for now is just trying to contain until after the elections. Because being part of the country, there have been incidents in the past where a former president had to virtually mow down an entire village. And with the limited attacks that the Nigerian state has made in the Nigerian military, they've been accused of human rights abuses, and indeed there have been human rights abuses. However, it does seem to me that the state is taking it as a very delicate matter, like a family affair, where the might of the Nigerian army does not need to be deployed in combating the activities of Boko Haram because of the collateral damage that will go with it. And so, in all of these with the military that appears, reluctant and the lack of political will, what is now left is how to manage what appears as a potential crisis. And already the two parties are talking, and it does seem to me that with the will being exhibited by the two candidates to avoid violence, and also the cultural attitude that Nigerians have towards such kind of large-scale violence, it might not be doomsday, on February 14 and afterwards. We do think that with the reputation of Nigerian politicians to cross from one political party to the other, depending on which serves their interest, once the elections are over, this is not a very scientific prediction, but it does look like there will be some kind of trade-off, and the losers will find ways of getting into the new political arrangement. However, the anxieties remain about this election, and I think that in captioning it with Nigeria falling apart, that's the talk for today. The organizers may not be too far from the sentiments that surround the election. Thank you very much.